recording. We're already going. Yeah.
Hey. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not live.
Yeah.
So,
No, I
so yeah.
no, I got it.
But yeah, so which part of Philly?
West Philadelphia,
Oh,
born
nice.
and bred.
Wow. That's so how'd you get to Baltimore?
Well, it's interesting you say that you're 27.
Yeah.
I realized that's how old I was when I came to Baltimore. And I came to Baltimore to go to graduate school at Hopkins.
Okay.
And so that was, again, it's such an interesting time in your life, right? Because you've graduated, or you're starting to say, okay, you're going towards 30, so you're past your 20s, and you're kind of working out who you are.
Yeah.
That's for me. It's
Absolutely.
Like, who am I? What do I want to do?
Very
and
correct.
So I thought I was going to be a school teacher. That was my plan. When I got out of college, I was going to be a school teacher. I actually took a lot more time to graduate from college, and so it took me 9 years to graduate from college because I did a lot of different things. I worked, I sold jewelry, I traveled across the country. Awesome. I did some activism as a student. So I was a student activist and just did a lot of different things. And as I started approaching 26, 27, I was like, I should probably do something a little more traditional, a little track. But also, I've always been so excited to learn and to take information and use that information to make things better. Yeah. And so I had some experience in schools. I had done student teaching, and I always noticed those kids that had been kind of classified as like problem kids, or no one could kind of handle them. And I was really drawn to them. I said, well, these are the ones, they're smart. And we really lose a lot of creativity, and we lose a lot of potential if we don't figure out how to reach those kids. And again, and then not in this kind of deficit way, like there's a problem with it. So I decided to study sociology because what I realized is that it's not the individual, it's the system that they're in. So that kind of has brought me to where I am today, running for mayor. Like everything has been about the people, but also the systems. And so graduates going to Hopkins and getting a PhD in sociology that's what I did.
So when you were at Hopkins, it's kind of a random question. I didn't prepare this, but was there a large African American presence at Hopkins?
No, there still isn't.
Yeah, I know. I just wanted to make sure that
I was the one. It seemed like every 4 years, apparently, there was another person.
Got it.
We had, Latinx now, we say Latino. And then there was a gentleman from the Dominican Republic, and he was of African descent. Okay. But just your, old-fashioned, homegrown African American, not too many. Yeah. So, I was one of that. And then being in this field of sociology where there's always this pathologizing of the Negro family and, and poverty and, looking at structure, but always in this really subtle way, blaming Black people for our own situation. So that was always a part of the theory. So learning what was working about the theory of the structures, but also pushing against it in graduate school.
So you have a really interesting background relative to the other people that I've either heard about or talked to with your background in sociology. Yeah. And ironically enough, a lot of those same issues are obviously still here. Right. And everyone kind of has an opinion on the sources of the problems in Baltimore, right? The violence, where does that come from? I mean, I have my own opinion. I'm curious to know what your opinion on sort of like, I guess, the hot topic issues in Baltimore. For instance, violence. What are some of the maybe indicators that you've seen either as a senator or just from a sociology
and just being a human in life. In fact, today I just presented a bill in Annapolis talking about trauma and requiring the statewide department, our Maryland State Department of Education, to create a trauma-informed program for the whole state, and requiring each jurisdiction to have a plan to provide funding for us to create a fund that will allow different jurisdictions to really incorporate this trauma-informed approach. in the schools, because there's all this discussion around discipline, right? Again, problem children,
Yeah.
right? And not really looking at the circumstances around them. So yeah, violence. If you have been the survivor of violence, of assaults, if you are in poverty, if you grow up in a society that says you're not of value, that can make you angry.
Yeah.
Right? And that can make you angry, and you can either, there's different ways that anger expresses itself. You can become angry and hurt yourself, which happens, through drugs, or, physically hurting yourselves, like we have some children.
Yeah.
And young people. Or you're like, well, no, I'm not gonna hurt myself, I'm gonna hurt somebody else.
Yeah.
And I don't know that people are making that conscious decision, but it's like it's survival. And so that's what I see. So there's the poverty, there's the trauma, there's the legitimate anger and frustration of the situations that you see in the world, and you just want to lash out, and you end up lashing out at the people behind, that are closest to you. We just have the ability to get a gun in this country, in this state, in this city is still way too easy.
Yeah.
So if you're angry and I hit you, that's one consequence. But if I'm angry and I pull a trigger, that's another consequence. And so the anger is still there, but how that can result in your ability to harm another is facilitated by the fact that we have all these guns.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think not a lot, but I think that people talk about two Baltimores. I think that there is a part of Baltimore, a part of Maryland, should I say, that might not relate to the environment that a lot of people in certain places in Baltimore grew up in. And so when you see certain behaviors, you don't understand it. I remember trying to explain to a friend of mine who's from out of state, grew up in suburban America, and I grew up in Evanston. And so I was trying to explain and visited my old neighborhood, and I kind of, was just telling him, trying to give him some rules to the road, so to speak, because we were kind of walking around. I just wanted to show him my neighborhood where I grew up, and he didn't understand why certain things mattered and other things mattered.
Like
didn't
respect.
Matter. Like eye contact.
Eye contact.
That's a big deal.
Because I grew up in Philadelphia,
Yeah.
and one of the things you learn pretty early on, you're walking to school, and you need to just dip your head.
Absolutely.
You can't just ignore people, because
Absolutely.
then that's a whole, who do you think
Absolutely.
you are? Do you think you're better? So you're in communities where respect is really there, and so you're right. Sometimes people don't understand that. Like, how can a lack of respect result in a murder or a death or an
Because
assault?
it means that much, and it's interesting. That was a situation. I remember we had a mutual friend who had gotten arrested out of state, and this was over something small. I think it was like a bar fight. He put the guy in the hospital.
Right.
My friend is a very cerebral person, and he was like, "Oh, well, why would you do all that? You could have just handled it in so many different logical ways."
Right.
And so I was trying to explain to him that when you grow up in certain neighborhoods deprived of a whole lot, the last thing you kind of have is your own kind of self-agency and the ability to protect yourself. So you learn how to protect yourself by any means possible.
Did you have some friends that then, because even if you grow up in a more affluent situation, they have a lot of violence too. It's just that they're in a situation where they can hide it, or their parents can get them off the charts. So you have bullying and assaults, sexual assaults, physical assaults happening in your elite institutions, right? But it just isn't brought up as a social problem. They get to be treated as individuals. This is where kind of the sociology comes. It's like there's an individual pathology, whereas in our city and for people that look like us, it's the whole group that is pathologized. And so that's a huge. So I always say the things that happen in Baltimore City, maybe they're more acute, but they also are, the poverty, the homelessness, the anger, the frustration, the disregard for human life that our economic system displays, putting a monetary value on people based on how much money you make or where you live.
Absolutely.
That dehumanizes you in a way that makes you not value your life, and then also not value other people's lives. I don't know, have you had that conversation?
You're 100% correct. It was my dad actually has a thing that he likes to say a lot, which is like, I think if half of the people in the city are starving, no one is safe. So he kind of looks at Baltimore like that, in the sense of, you know, you have kids who are hustling out here on, you know, main roads, out on President, on MLK. You have people panhandling, you have people stealing, whatever. Like, it's all, like you're saying, symptoms of a deeper systematic issue, which is poverty, economic disparities, as well as just sort of like generational trauma. Because that is one thing that growing up where I grew up, you don't think that there's anything dramatic about your life. You just think that's how it is. Like, I remember I was telling my dad that I remember the first time I saw someone get murdered. I was around the corner on a street that my grandmother told me never to be on Loretta, over in West Baltimore. And I saw somebody get shot in the head. Right? And I was like 6 or 7 years old. But I felt like that was like, I heard so many stories about, I saw somebody get shot, I saw somebody get stabbed, I saw police beat up this dude. So it's like, how do you get, on one hand, how do you get people to recognize that there is traumatic sort of like, untreated issues? And then also, how do you get the patients, or me, or people that are living in these situations, to realize that there's even a traumatic experience that happened? Right,
because there's stigma. Because like, if you admit that, and that's the little bit of problem I think with using the word trauma, although we're doing it and it's real. There's another way we talk about it. It's called the ACE scale. It's adverse childhood experiences. And so there's a list of like 10 different things. And so what you do is you could actually develop a scale of like how many of these things have happened to you. You know, a parent incarcerated, seeing, losing a parent, being bullied. I would add, I don't know if it's in there, but have you been exposed to lead? Right? There are these different things. And so you talk about it as adverse childhood experiences, and the more that you have had, that is what kind of shapes your reactions to things. And so if we could, it's kind of hard, I think, to call it trauma, and we will continue to use that, but that I think connotes kind of a weakness and a dysfunction that people don't really want to embrace.
And also,
right?
I don't know if you can relate, but there are certain terms that I think, speaking for people from my community, terms that don't seem like they relate or talk to us. So like words like trauma seem like quote unquote white people words.
Right.
Like they've never been used to describe our experience, and now all of a sudden they're being used.
What's the word?
Exactly.
Because it's real though. It's like it's something. So what's trauma? That means that means that that something is violating you, and there's still a hurt, even though it's healed, even though you can't see it, it's still there. I mean, that's kind of what that means. So we do need a word, because none of the work that we're doing as legislators, as what I hope to do as mayor, if it doesn't make sense to the people who are who you're trying to improve the quality of life for, and if they're not part of it, then it's not going to work. So we need another word.
Absolutely, I've been thinking
because
about
trauma, and again, from a psychological, from a public health approach, because that's where it's coming from. It's like, let's have a public health approach to violence. Let's have a public health approach to discipline. That's an attempt to try to not say that it's the person, individual, naturally, if they were born that way, that it's something that happened to you. And so that's what we're trying to figure out. But we need to talk about it in a way that is owned by folks. But so how do people people just don't talk about it?
I literally, I'm just trying to think. People only talk about it, people in my community, it's usually when there's a death or when something so large that it kind of rocks the whole community, then people kind of talk about, what happened, or maybe what led to this, or trying not to do certain activities because it led to this. And there's a moment of reflection.
And then it's over. I'm just reminded.
Literally over.
My mother grew up in North Carolina. She's from South Carolina, North Carolina. She's a nurse. And I remember I was having a hard time in college, and I just, I'm going to college, I'm learning all kinds of things. And I said, I don't know, I think I might be depressed. My mother said, you're too poor and black to be depressed. She just said that, but it's like you just got to step up, you got to move, right? But at the same time, we do that so we don't really ever address what harm is actually happening. So it ends up, we overeat, or you smoke too much, or you do all these other things. But it's also why we've survived in this country, from slavery to, segregation, to all of these things. Which is how strong we are. At the same time, no matter how strong you are, you gotta, at some point, you might need some help. And so how do we make it safe and okay? How does it become strong? How does it become strong to say, you know what, a lot of stuff happened and I need to deal with it, and I need help to deal with it, and that help is gonna make me even stronger. Instead of that saying me asking for help means I'm weak and not deserving of your respect.
I think a lot of the times, for me at least, it's usually when you see someone that you have a high amount of respect for, go through a situation and exhibit the correct behavior. So for me, I had a cousin who was incarcerated for like 15 or 20 years, or something like that, like a long time. Mm-hmm. Met him like one time when I was younger, and then kind of didn't really see him again for a while. Mm-hmm. And he came out of a prison and came to my house, randomly surprised me, and kind of told me about what got him there, why he took the time there to go to school, etc., and see a psychologist, all these different things. I was in high school at the time, and that had a big impact on me. Pretty much I went from getting kicked out of school, suspended or whatever, to kind of figuring out that, hey, these systems and institutions are unforgiving for people that look like me and you in terms of certain situations, and I really can't afford to not address kind of what's going on. So I was kind of forced to by situations and by someone that I respected a lot, who had garnered the respect of the streets, so to speak, but had been humbled by situations. And me seeing that, I think made an impression on me, and I've seen that with other people who you may have, someone who might have been affiliated with a gang or whatever, turn their life and, like a Nipsey Hussle type person, and that's able to speak to a whole group of people that would never listen to the types of things that he was saying if it came from somebody else.
And that's why everybody has to be a part of the solution. Every single person. And so you were talking about crime.
Absolutely.
So the last month or so, I've been having community meetings to discuss the community safety proposal, right? And it's still on my website, marywashingtonforbaltimore.com. And we're getting feedback on what the proposal is, and what do you think will make our community safer, or what's a healthy city, and how do we restore trust and accountability in the police department? Like, that's one of the things, one of the pillars. Another is, how do we build or rebuild a police department that we want? Like, what does that look like? How do we build healthy Baltimoreans? So that could be about youth, but just what does it mean to be healthy in this city, and what are the things we need to do to get to that space? And then, another one is, what do we do to repair and heal our city, and heal individuals, but also our infrastructure? And one of the ideas that kind of gets to our conversation around stigma and admitting that you've been harmed would be to have around the city like community counseling, behavioral health centers that are not drug treatment facilities. It's not where you've been sent because of court. It's just they're just there in the community, a storefront. You could just walk in and talk to somebody, talk to a social worker, and have that slowly become something that people do if they need it. So instead of like you're having a big fight, it's 4th of July and you're with your family, you're having a fight and maybe people were drinking and I get a little tension.
Absolutely.
Like maybe if people feel that the situation is starting to hype up, there's somebody that you could go to without having to worry about people getting arrested.
Absolutely.
To just be like, hey, there's this situation here. Or you could just voluntarily walk in and say, I've been yelling at people a lot,
Yeah.
getting ready to get fired at work.
Something's going on.
I don't know, something's going on. Can I talk? And without an appointment, without any stigma, just kind of confidential. What do you think of that idea?
I think it's a great idea, honestly. And I was trying to picture if it would work, but I think in a weird way, I was thinking about why something like that is needed, and it kind of reminded me how so many of the programs that students had access to, public programs, have been stripped away from the city. So many public spaces. So I was like, that may have naturally have been happening at places like music class or art class or sports class. You know what I mean? And maybe because those things have been stripped away, people don't have an outlet, right? Kids don't have an outlet. Youth don't have an outlet. Young adults don't have an outlet of here's a thing that I can do that I have a community of people that are similar to me and they can hear me out when I'm upset. Like I have my group of friends. Everybody has their group of friends that they talk to when they're kind of going through it. But
everybody doesn't.
Everybody doesn't. Exactly.
Everybody doesn't.
Yeah.
Everybody doesn't have
That's
that
true.
group. So those feelings just get
Exactly.
pressed down and they come out.
Yeah.
And so, but the other thing is, Mayor, we have to reinstitute art programs throughout the schools, recreation programs throughout the schools, and also figure out how police aren't just, that they engage in equitable, effective, and constitutional policing.
Yeah. So what does equity mean to you?
To me, that means that we look at the city as a whole, and we look at all the needs, the public safety needs, but also, that we are not over-policing some areas where there's lots and lots of police officers. And the police officers are not engaged in being a part of the community, but just are engaged in surveillance and arrests for cause. But instead, a situation where, and this was also a suggestion that came out of the community meetings, was that they are a part of everyday life, so they're walking a beat. They are a part of everyday life, and not just for when you call, there's a problem. So certainly there might be people out there that might feel like, oh yeah, what do you want police officers planting trees? But if police and also our health professionals, our teachers, everybody that's a public employee, a city employee, under my administration, my desire would be that you are not just in your little silo.
Thank you.
That you see that the police department, recreation, the arts, public health, public works, our transportation system, we're all part of the same system of making our city run well. And everybody has their job, everybody has their skill set. But at any time, somebody should be able to have a conversation across the silos.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think as you were talking, I was thinking about like what that would look like. Once again, trying to imagine it in my mind, and I think it would work because I think a lot of the issues, and someone might be upset, but I think a lot of the issues are super simple in the sense of like, I recognize the difference. I went to school in Kentucky for 4 years, so I went to school in rural Kentucky, eastern Kentucky, and when I would leave campus, I'd have I'd visit Tennessee and Atlanta, different places. So spent a good amount of time in Knoxville, Sevierville, all the villes. Nashville, and Tennessee is a beautiful state.
Yeah, it is.
But anyway, but I remember the idea that I had of the South before I went there. And then after exposure for a couple of years, I became very, very comfortable living in the South. I never thought I would, never visited there before. And I think the same thing is true, like the situation where I was with a couple buddies of mine who also looked pretty much like me, different shades of me. And we were having a exciting conversation. And someone on the outside thought we were about to start arguing, start fighting, thought we were about to start breaking stuff. And they call, this is in school, and they call campus safety. They call public safety on us. We were in the cafeteria where it was like the only place we could yell, about whatever it is we're talking about.
It's being enthusiastic.
We're just cracking jokes.
Each other's energy and hyping up.
And people looked at that as, they associated that behavior with violence, with potential for whatever, so we're gonna hurt somebody. And I think that's a large issue with how cops interact with young brown males in the city, or young brown youth people in the city in general, is that I feel like they don't know how to recognize, where a behavior that's going to lead to something, and so they just kind of go from 0 to 100 on every single thing. So when you see the video of the young girl getting put on the ground for nothing, or the 6-year-old kid getting put in handcuffs, these are in other cities. But that speaks to a problem where there's this disconnect of like.
And that's for training. So another part of my platform around making sure that we have the police department that we need is making sure that you have that training and the behavioral, and that you have teams of that. I feel like every precinct should have social workers and behavioral health people and psychologists that are targeted, that are residing, that are in that department and working with them. Absolutely. So that if you run into somebody, we're gonna call because somebody's yelling on the corner, and they could be having a psychic break, and that they shouldn't be arrested, but they need to have somebody come in and help them. So, but we've put the police officers in a situation they don't have the training. We're calling them because we're scared, and then they have a culture. They've been inherited a culture of where you just arrest and ask questions later. If everybody gets the training, we use we enforce the consent decree, we do constitutional policing, we protect and respect people's civil rights. Then when we're actually making arrests, because people break the law, they need to be arrested, but then those arrests have a high standard. Yeah. And then when there's a conviction, that conviction is just and it'll stand, right? And but now we're in a situation where it's unfortunate people are questioning the arrests. Absolutely. And again, if someone's homeless or if someone is just having a good time, they shouldn't be arrested. But that's about reading the situation. And that's where if more police officers lived in the city, if more police officers were a part of the day-to-day life of the community, they could read that situation. And even though maybe I call and say, hey, there's a bunch of black boys on the corner and they're really loud, I say, oh yeah, I know them. That's Zeke. Yeah, they yell. Exactly. That's how that is. And then the police officers are in a situation where they're helping the public restore the public's trust, in the black men in this community, that I understand what's going on there, and then we can start to understand each other. But the thing is, I believe we can do it. Absolutely. I don't think that none of what we're talking about is impossible. I don't think so at all. You just have to have a mayor and a group of people who are committed to making a clean break from the past. That's why I'm running, is that I offer a unique, you said I was a graduate student here, but I grew up in Philadelphia. I'm the oldest of 6 children. Wow. My dad has been employed, has been unemployed. My mom was a nurse, so she kind of was always employed. So I know that there are a lot of families that are just struggling with that dynamic. I have that personal experience. That's a lot of what's in Baltimore. I went to public schools. I know the way public schools have been divested in. But then, I had this opportunity to come here and go to graduate school and move on and get involved in the community and see that I could make a change in my neighborhood, and then decide, hey, elected office through a range of experience, that can expand my ability to do good work and work with good people. And then I ran to be the senator, and that expand my opportunity again. And I've been in Annapolis for 9 years, really working hard for my city, just trying to get more money for public education, improve transportation, where appropriate, make changes in criminal justice reform. And then I come home and it's a mess. It's broken. And I've been doing that year after year. And at a certain point, right, it's your house. This is my house. I'm going away to try to improve. It's like you're working someplace away and you're sending money home, and you come home and they spent all the money and the mortgage is due, and you're like, well, why am I out there? So I said, I need to come home because the people in the city deserve to have someone that has these connections to Annapolis, respects who they are, but also has really high standards and an ability to be analytical, but also compassionate. And that's what I'm bringing to this, a unique, no other candidate has this range of experiences that I have.
Yeah.
And the fact that I teach in college, I'm connecting with young people. Every 4 years is a new batch, and we're learning new things and learning how to speak and how to communicate. And also, I have really good connections with seniors communities, and I really would love to see much more intergenerational conversations. And we can do that. A mayor, while that's not the job to be the social worker for the city or to be the sociologist for the city, but to be the person that can connect. I don't know. Does this make any sense?
No, you're
to you?
100% right. So like that is a big issue. I feel like it's like when we look at the president, we believe that the president should represent the country. But when we look at mayors, I don't know that we, as citizens, or maybe we've been conditioned like this in Baltimore, I don't know that we look to the mayor to represent the city. Like my grandparents kind of talk about mayors of the past that kind of represented Baltimore. Like my grandmother used to talk about Smoke all the time, and like William Downey Schaefer and different politicians who like brought something to Baltimore that kind of that made an impact on the culture of the city. And to be blunt, I feel like the last couple of mayors, for multiple different reasons, I don't know that they've sort of embodied the city in the sense of not necessarily they already have to embody the city, but kind of take the city and be the example of how you should be, like who you should be aspiring to be. Absolutely. Like a role model.
Yeah. Well, we've had corruption.
Oh yeah.
Just blatant disregard.
Absolutely.
Apathy. Lack of vision. And so I'm the opposite of all that.
Absolutely.
So if nothing else, I want to restore the office of the mayor to really have integrity and honesty and be smart and have it be respected within our own city. Because right now, people say to me, "Mary, you're really good. You're an honest person. You work hard. You have great ideas. Why would you be mayor?" It's like, yes, but that, because of all of that, and you should expect your mayor to be that. And unfortunately, our standards, and from the White House. Our standards and beliefs about what mayors should be has declined, and that hurts our democracy. Absolutely. That hurts our future, how we're represented across the state. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to being a representative, but also bringing people to the table, making sure that the development decisions that we make involve communities. Because I was a community association president, I know how many smart people are there grinding it out every day, really trying to make a difference, and they're not getting the support or the respect that they deserve. And they're just being assumed either they don't have the education, or they're not related to this family, or they didn't, and that's not it. There's a lot of great people doing really good things, and they're doing a better job than some of the people getting paid $200,000 a year.
Absolutely, that's a fact.
And we need to be spending more of our money growing our own talent, and that's what I would do.
So I have two final questions because I know we have time. So one thing, so I posted on my Instagram that I'd be talking to you, and some people gave me some questions. So I thought I'd ask you some of those. So the first question was around the immigrant community. So I used to live over in East Lombard. And when I was living over there was a huge Latinx population. And it's still pretty large in Highlandtown, East Baltimore. English not as a first language. That community and those schools over there, some of them are 90% Latin community. So given the current state of international affairs by the one that sits over in DC, sometimes sits over in DC, what would be your message to those people in those communities who are worried about? I mean, I literally had someone that I was a family friend get deported a couple 2 months ago, and I never experienced that. Like, I'm a black man in America. I experienced all these different things, but I never experienced deportation to someone who I knew, and it wasn't because of nefarious reasons. It was just because it was a roundup. So what would be your message to that community?
Well, as I always have as a state senator and as a delegate, I stood up for the DREAM Act. The fact that I'm American born, I'm in a position to be an ally to other people who are not, and I'm in a position to be able to often what happens is the majority culture tries to pit us against each other, tries to pit American-born blacks, pit us against other black and brown people, and say, well, you know, I'd hire you if it wasn't for X, Y, Z, and that's a lie. And so, but if we work together and support each other, because what they say to the immigrant community is like, well, you know, with those African Americans, they don't really want to work hard. They don't, you know, they don't value education the way that you do. So, you know, we're going to help you, and so that beef you up, and so you think you're superior. So they've given each of us different messages so that we don't bond together.
Absolutely.
So I'm someone who believes very much in coalitions, in the value of everyone. I consider myself a walking coalition. You know, I represent lots of different communities, and so for me, Baltimore City would be a sanctuary city. We're not cooperating with ICE. We're not doing that. And so we have to figure out the economic consequence. You know, how do we protect ourselves economically? You know, should there be withdrawal of federal funds or things like that? But you know, we should be able to tolerate that. But most important, people working here, going to school here, they're not violating. You know, they are being a part of our community.
Absolutely.
And that's where I stand.
Yeah.
100%.
Beautiful. And the last question is, how is your tenure time as a senator? Like, what tools from that experience? I'm sure there's a lot, but maybe what are some of the main tools that you would bring to the office of mayor or to the city government in general?
I think it's having the larger view of, there's the national view, but of Maryland government. 4 years on appropriations committee, ways and means, where all the election law is, where the tax laws are, where our gaming laws are. Having relationships with people across the state. So I was one of 141 legislators, and now I'm one of 47, understanding about how laws get passed. But I also, in my work before I became a senator, I ran programs. I was associate director of Parks and People Foundation, so I did create after-school programs for youth. I was a bean counter for the Housing Authority of Baltimore City. I call it a bean counter, but I was the performance management accountability specialist of one of the largest city agencies. So for 3 years, every 2 weeks, I was doing, you know, helping manage that whole division. And so I bring this intellectual, theoretical policy, this practical lawmaking experience, and this executive experience, in addition to my life experience and commitment and values, in a constellation that no other candidate has this set of skills.
Well, I just want to thank you for your time.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
It was great talking to you. Hopefully we can do it again. Great. But thank you for coming on. This was just talking with Mayor Washington.